Anything else? Any questions? Okay, our first speaker today is, well, this group, I've been around 999 for some time, and as far as people having social and emotional needs, nobody beats this group. Nobody. That's why we have SENG. And Lori, Comallie, okay. Sorry.
Like hot
I
tamale.
always call it Lori. No, I know. Comallie is the president of of SENG, and you've been active in it for years and years and years, and I don't know what to say, but you're on, Lori.
You know what? I'll let them know. Did you want me to use this or the?
Can you use this?
I think I can. Although I'm kind of hyperactive, so it might be this and this and so.
Okay,
oh, what a beautiful morning! Oh, what a beautiful day! I have a beautiful feeling. We're gonna have a great day. Good morning, good morning, good morning. So I am rather hyperactive, and I am horrible for people like you because I'm over here, and I'm over here, and I'm over here. So hopefully you can follow me, right? Okay. So I want to tell you just a tiny bit about myself. I have a private practice in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and I do counseling, coaching, and consultation for gifted people across the age span. My youngest client is 18 months of age. My eldest client is 74 years of age, so I get to see a lot of wonderful people in that practice. But why I'm here today, we're going to make this work, is because I am currently president of SENG, and I just would like to give a show of hands. How many of you know about SENG? Only a few. That is really a tragedy. SENG stands for Supporting Emotional Needs of the Gifted, and we've been around for 31 years now. And we began as basically a parent support out of 2 suicides of very profoundly gifted young men. And Dr. Jim Webb, who is our founder, was on the Phil Donahue show after these suicides, and these parents came and were on the Phil Donahue show. 20,000 letters came in from families all across America saying, why isn't there any support for our gifted young people? And so SENG was founded at that time. However, we have grown and grown and grown and grown, and now we serve all different cultures. We have an international following. We do what we call seminars, which are webinars for the gifted. We have a conference once a year. Our conference next year is in San Jose, and it is a wonderful time. It's very different from other conferences because it's for the whole family. So we have a gifted adult strand, we have gifted parenting strands, we have CEs, continuing education for mental health professionals. We also have a children's program and a teens program. So there's something for everybody, whether you're a gifted individual or someone who serves gifted individuals. So I don't know what I'm going to have to pull this on. There we go. Whether we call them 999ers, whether we call them gifted, whether we call them highly able or highly capable, those of you who are in that upper echelon in terms of cognitive ability have a different neural net, right? So we act, we think, we perceive differently than some typically developing children, adults, and others. And what that brings is a very unique set of social-emotional abilities and needs. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So who are gifted adults? Who are the gifted adults? Are they those that were identified as children? Are they those who have become eminent in their fields? Are they those who were considered prodigies? Well, all of the above, right? And there are some people, you are very fortunate in that you have identified or been identified, because there are a lot of people walking around in this world who do not know of their gifts and talents, and they feel very isolated because they don't quite fit in. And so it's an important thing that we help people to understand their giftedness and their very unique social and emotional needs. So take a look at this list and raise your hands if this or these criteria fit you as children. And this list. So many of you, those of you who had your hands up, how many of you leave your hands up if you were identified as children? Go ahead. What? I heard a question.
What age are you talking about?
Well, what if you were identified, your mother was told, but you weren't?
Ooh, that's a tricky one, isn't it?
I'm with her.
Are you?
It's kind of a funny thing to find out when you're an adult.
That your mother knew and never told you.
Yes.
How many of you did that happen to? Wow, that's a much bigger group than I would have thought.
For me.
Teachers knew and didn't tell you.
I only knew because there was a sharp difference in their attitude towards me. And I figured out that I could guess.
I think that is not a good thing, because the gifted are on the top 2%, right, of the bell curve. And they need just a very specialized education and treatment as we use for kids on the bottom 2% of the bell curve. We need just as specialized. So it's very much a travesty when we don't let our kids know, or we don't give them that very special education or that very special treatment. However, you're right. Very many parents go, I don't want my kid to have a label. I don't want them to be treated any differently. I don't want them to think that they're an elite, right? Being gifted doesn't make you elite or better, but it does define a very special set of needs and circumstances that need to be addressed. So we want to make sure that we help our children. So, gifted children don't fall off trees, but the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So how many of you have children who are also 99.9ers are gifted, right? So we have people who will deny their giftedness, adults that will say, so if I'm training gifted parents, the first thing I always do is say, raise your hand if you are gifted. And guess what? Not every hand goes up. So, but what does that tell children? If you don't identify yourself and say, hey, I'm gifted, if you reject your own giftedness, and I can tell you gifted children know that they have gifted parents, but when you don't raise your hand, gifted children go, why isn't my mom or my dad, why aren't they raising their hands? I know this fits them. Is it something to be embarrassed about? Is it something that we shouldn't let other people know? So it's very important that you identify yourself so that your children can feel comfortable identifying themselves. All right, so what happens, though, is that sometimes gifted adults grow up and think, because they're not identified in a school system, I'm no longer gifted. I left my gifts behind in childhood. I go from prodigy to plodigy. Right? So what we have to do is we want to recognize that we stay gifted, and some of those same challenges that we had in childhood remain with us as adults in the work environment, in social environments, and so forth. How many of you had challenges kind of fitting in or getting what you felt you needed in the educational system? Duh! Oh, of course. So who might be willing to share just a little bit of their story this morning about growing up?
Hello. I grew up in my father was in the Navy, and as such we moved around an awful lot. And after my father went off to Vietnam, I went off to my grandparents' house where I spent the rest of my formative years. And it's an extremely rural area where there's simply no money for such things as gifted programs. As a matter of fact, more recently, I wrote an article for ISB East Telecom, noting that in our own county where we live now, if you just use the straight percentages of the 2%, that would be 6 entire children in the whole county would fit into a gifted program. There's no way you're going to have one for such a small group of people. In high school, in elementary school and high school, it was very apparent to me that not only was I different and I could do work easier or more quickly rather than others, it also became very apparent to me that if I did such things, that I was a pariah. And I was expected to do others' homework for them or have people copy off my paper during tests or whatnot. In one test I conducted myself with a test, I intentionally marked all the wrong answers on an examination, waited for everybody to copy my paper, and then changed them all to the right answer, and then got beat up after school.
James was not a plant. I did not script for him to say that. That is the story that I hear over and over and over again. I was a pariah. That's the first time I've heard that one. But I was isolated. I didn't fit in. This is the story that we hear over and over and over again. And we want to make sure that as gifted adults that we are passing along to children a better way. Okay, so let's look at some of those very distinct characteristics that we would have. Divergency, that creative thought, that thinking outside the box. I found some great cartoons for you last night. I have to show them for you. So that thinking outside the box, coming up with new solutions. So if I ask how many of you were divergent thinkers, show hands. It's going to be most everybody in the room. Let's look at next one. Excitability. Who in this room has ever been told that they are intense? James, right? That intensity, that underlying intensity. For some people, like Susan and I, it's a very outward intensity, right? And we're hyperactive and we move from one thing to another and it's the next best project and we're very excited. And for some people, it is a very quiet intensity. It is the same intensity, but it is more inward. But we are all intense and excitable. We also look at sensitivity. What does that mean, sensitivity? It goes beyond just being emotional. It goes into looking at and outside yourself. And we're going to talk a little bit more when we talk about overexcitabilities. But gifted people tend to have this, I call it, the fight for truth, justice, and the American way, right? Because they have this incredible ethical, this incredible need for justice, this incredible need for fairness, not for themselves, but for the greater world. There is sometimes an incredible dissonance that we'll talk about between what the world is and their thought of what it ought to be. What's really happening, what ought to be, and the dissonance that causes. It's sometimes difficult to fit in because people don't understand that. It goes so far beyond self. They don't understand, well, that's happening on the other side of the world. Why are you so concerned with that? There we go. Along with that goes the perceptivity, and that's almost being a mind reader, being so in tune. And I think one of the reasons is that your brains work so much faster, so much more efficiently. You're making incredible connections at a very fast rate of speed, and so you see patterns. My husband's in the back of the room, and I told him I'm going to use him later on. And I use him all the time when I'm presenting, but he's not usually in the room. So, it gives me more of a free license. But he's a clinical psychologist, and he is one of the best at what he does. And he's a triple niner, and not in your group, but he should be. And he sees patterns. Like, I've never seen anybody see patterns. And so it's like you see the layers, of an onion, you see all the way to the core. And that can make people uncomfortable. when you're perceptive, in a way, they haven't told you something, but you're perceiving what they're feeling, what they're thinking. That sometimes can make you kind of an isolated person. They're like, ooh, I don't want to hang out with that person too much because they can see into me. And that is also a characteristic, right?
I was going to say from, going to many Mensa gatherings, it seems that to some degree the opposite, that members seem to not get social cues as often as the general populace and don't read body language as well necessarily. So maybe you could comment on that.
Well, of course, we have a continuum of characteristics, right? And not every characteristic applies to every gifted adult. And so there may be gifts and talents in one area for one person, and it depends on your mindset as well. So if you, and I hate to use the cliche, but, engineers tend to be more focused on data and non-personal types of things. So those people who are, let's just say, squares,
I resemble that.
Our square personalities may not be so focused on the people piece of things, so their perceptiveness and their connections are going to be with the data they work with rather than the people they work with. But the same kind of thing can happen. The perceptivity is regarding connections and patterns with maybe objects instead of people. Yes, I want to love. I want to be loved. So please laugh at me. Please clap at me. And the circle people are going to have those perceptions about other people, and they're going to make those connections and see those patterns with people. So it's a great point that you made, and it does seem that in that continuum that there are differences not only in how many of these characteristics you might show, but in the way that you show those characteristics as well. So that's a great comment. Thank you. Come on. Please. I'm just going to walk over here and do it. There we go. And another characteristic that really sets aside the gifted adult is that inner self-determination. Those autonomous skills that really bring a deeper meaning to life, to relationships, to the world, in terms of being goal-oriented, but not just goal-oriented, but for a greater good. Not just a personal goal, but for a greater good, reaching outside yourself. So I think that you should think about, number one, these are typical characteristics, but they are in a continuum. You may not have all of them. Some may be more than others, and they may be exhibited or manifested in different ways in terms of whether it's with people, with objects, with things. What I want to do, though, is really look at Dabrowski's theory. How many of you have heard of the theory of positive disintegration? Oh my, okay. This is going to be a lot of fun. Actually, this is an all-day long lecture, so I'm going to give you a brief synopsis, and we're going to find out where you fall. So, Kazimierz Dabrowski was a Polish psychologist whose work has really been expanded upon by Michael Pachewski here in the United States, and Salman Dalio has done a lot of work as well. And he had childhood experiences in World War I, but his theories developed out of World War II, seeing the atrocities, but also the greater good, the character that kept some people alive in this, that made such a difference. So in his theory, I'm going to give up on this. Okay. So what we want to do is look at, it's not giftedness produces a greater quality of experiencing life. So this is the way I explain it. And usually I'm in a group of young teachers, and some of them don't even remember. And there are some young people in here that might not remember, but do you guys remember the rabbit ears on the TVs? Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. I'm glad this audience knows what I'm talking about, because that doesn't always happen for me. Okay, rabbit ears. How many stations did you get with rabbit ears?
3.
4, 6, 3. Wow, 1/2. You looked at a really rough, right? The best we could probably get is 20, right? 19? Yeah. All right, so If I look at a typically developing brain, their reception is about 19 channels, okay? When we look at gifted brains, think about satellite dishes, right? How many channels do we have on satellite dishes? Hundreds, right? 365, I don't know. Hundreds. So there's a different reception. So when you're looking at the neural net of a gifted brain, the reception is so much better. And we have so much coming in at one time. But what that turns out is it's a blessing and a curse. And that's what we want to look at. So when we look at the theory of positive disintegration, which is where overexcitabilities come out of, it says that as we develop personally, ethically, developmentally, that we have this dissonance that happens at times in our life, and that there's a breakdown, that actually there needs to be a breakdown, and that change emerges out of that breakdown. So it's a positive disintegration of the personality. As we have that conflict, how many of you remember that point, that first point where you went, this is not the way the world should be. This is not right. I need to give up some of the values I have, and you had a time of questioning and conflict, and out of that emerged a different personality, a better personality. How many of you remember that conflict in yourselves? That's that positive disintegration that Dabrowski is talking about. And so it becomes the birth of a higher psychic structure. And this is a wonderful, honestly, if you're interested in this, there's a book that Sal Mandaglio did on the theory of positive disintegration that you would really, really enjoy. And if you wanted the application piece, not the theory piece, Living with Intensity by Susan Daniels is another one that would really help you to understand this. What I want to do is kind of give you a taste, because we only have a short amount of time this morning. So I want to have each of you do a little survey. It's kind of like what Susan did with you, a little test to see where your overexcitabilities are. So I'm going to pass that out and give you a little bit of time to do that.
Boy, a test.
Oh, boy, a test!
We've all taken tests, haven't we? Anyone here who has not?
I'm excited.
But it's going to frustrate you because the standardization only goes up to the 75th percentile, And it may save you time. If you'll hold on just a second, we'll get the score out. If you put your scores right into the scorer, you can do it either way. You can transfer your scores or put them right into the scorer. So let me pass that out to you.
Have enough here?
No. Because I was too excited about getting a test.
Here they are.
So I would suggest you plug your scores right into the scorer, which is this other sheet. It will take you far less time than circling it on your sheets. So go 1, 2, 3. There's a white space for you to plug in your score. There are 2 spaces, which I don't have my glasses on. Number 38 and number 44 are reverse items. So if you choose the score of 5, your score is going to actually be 1 in the scorer. If you choose a score of 2, your score is actually going to be 4. So on those 2 items, you reverse the order of your score. 38, it's written in there. 38, you'll see it says reverse. And 44 are reverse items. So you plug in the reverse score. If you choose a 3, obviously it's going to be a 3. So let's just take a few minutes to do that. In each column, and you'll get your index score. And on the back of your score sheet, there is a key in terms of where you are. And those of you that fall with in the psychomotor 3.9 or higher, do you see the 75th percentile? You would be considered to have an overexcitability if you fall above the at or above the 75th percentile. So your answers from your questions go in the right spots according to the number of the question on the front. When you finish that, you total the numbers in each column. Divide by 10, that gives you your index score. And then there's a key on the back of the score sheet. If your number falls at or above the 75th percentile, you would be considered to have that overexcitability.
Just see that the intellectual and imaginational is switched.
Yes, the imaginational and the intellectual fall in a different order. I'm not sure why. On the back side.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Finding that out.
Yes.
I got it all wrong.
So make sure you're matching the category to your actual index score. I know. Okay, you guys can go ahead and continue to work as we progress through so that we can talk about each of these areas of overexcitability. You're going to see that the areas of overexcitability overlap significantly with the characteristics and traits of adults. They're just being molded in another way. Dabrowski and Pahevsky looked at thousands and thousands of gifted individuals across the age span to come up with these overexcitabilities, these 5 overexcitabilities. And they are all characterized with a level of intensity that you wouldn't see in typical people, typical population. So each of these areas also have an intensity that goes along with it. It has seemed that the higher the IQ, in this case, the higher the measured IQ, the more overexcitabilities a person tends to have. Some gifted people have no overexcitabilities. Some gifted people have all 5 overexcitabilities. So it doesn't mean that it doesn't actually mean that you're a higher level of IQ, but it has been noticed that there are more overexcitabilities the higher the IQ is. Okay, let's start with psychomotor.
Just repeat yes. Total that is higher or lower than 70% or whatever it is you said.
It's right here.
Ah, got it.
Okay.
The other side.
On the other side of your score sheet, each category is listed with percentile ranks. And those of you who are like taking copious notes, I post all my presentations on my website. So, and I have a card up here. So you can get a card afterwards and you can go to my website and download the whole presentation. And actually, it will have a bunch more slides than that's up here because there's not enough time to do everything in this presentation, so you'll get even a little more. Okay, so psychomotor. Psychomotor is the need for excessive movement. And sometimes in females, I'll tell you, it's all right here. You know, the rest of the body may not be moving, the mouth isn't going, and my husband will tell you that I talk from dawn to dusk and even in my sleep. That's where my psychomotor overexcitability is. So, this is boundless energy. These are people that, they have to stay busy. Their bodies have to be busy. We're going to talk about busy minds a little later, but this is busy body. My body has to be moving in some way. It doesn't mean I am hyperactive. The behaviors may look the same, but it is not the same as hyperactivity. So it's restless, it's constant fidgeting. It is nervous habits. Sometimes people develop a nervous habit, like twirling hair or, tapping the desk with a pencil, in order to accommodate their need to be busy all the time with their body. It's highly active. They're fast talkers. They drum their fingers. For kids, these are kids that fall out of their chairs in the classroom and are often misdiagnosed as ADHD. Yes. We have so many gifted kids being put on medication for ADHD because of their psychomotor overexcitability, and it shouldn't be there. So these are people at work as adults that need to get up and move around. They got to have a physical break. They can't stay in their seat. Some of you probably right now are going, I've been in this seat too long. I've got to get up. This is terrible. I can't. I'm rocking my husband and I, every now and then he lets me drive the car, right? So we come to a stop sign and the car's going, and I'm going, what's wrong with the motor? It must have come loose. And I look over and there's his leg going. I mean, just going to town. He never stops moving. His leg is always going. It's going in his sleep. It's going under his desk when he's talking to clients. So this is a person that has to always be busy. Busybody, busybody, busybody. And they actually are more productive if they can keep busy.
I don't know if you pointed this out, but on the back,
They're not in the same
two of them are reversed from the front, and it's confusing.
The intellectual, I'm not sure why they did that. It's not my test. The intellectual and the imaginational are switched on the back, so make sure you match the category to the score.
Whose test is it?
This is Pahevsky and Daniel's test based on Dabrowski's work.
Now, say it. Can you spell it, or is it going to be up there?
It's going to be up there in a little bit. Okay, so these are people that might need fidgets at work. You know, those little stress balls or squeeze balls in order to keep their bodies a-going.
Everyone.
I'm sorry?
Everyone.
Oh, yes, you may.
I am going to differ with something you said. I disagree that these are necessarily characteristics of brilliant people. They are characteristics. Many of them are characteristics of people with ADD. I disagree that ADD should not be treated with Ritalin or some other simpler medication. It took me 65 years of life to realize that I needed it. It's genetic, and very often it may often go along with high IQ. And I wouldn't want the people here to feel that if they have children with ADHD or if they have it, that they shouldn't take medication for it. So I just wanted to give that advice as a physician.
And I don't disagree with you. They can occur together, but many times it is a separate issue. And that's why you need somebody as a physician who is trained or a psychologist who is trained in gifted neurology as well as the medical symptoms of ADHD so that you can make a differential diagnosis on that particular issue. And the medication generally doesn't work for kids who aren't ADHD. So, and it definitely makes a difference for kids who are.
I would note as a non-physician that after our school identified me as being ADHD and sent me to a psychiatrist who insisted that I was and put me on Ritalin, he turned me into a zombie. I wound up falling down a flight of stairs. I spent time in the hospital over it, and I absolutely refused to have anything done with it with my own son.
I had a similar experience of seeing a neurologist or something, and she thought perhaps I was ADHD, put me on medication. Can't recall what it was, and it had absolutely no effect whatsoever, which was kind of neat.
Which showed you didn't need that. So I thank you, Ina, so much for making that distinction because they can occur together. There can be dual diagnoses of these two things, psychomotor overexcitability and ADHD. But many times it is a separate gifted issue, the psychomotor busybody, that should not be diagnosed. And that's why it's very, very important that physicians, mental health, those people who make those diagnoses are trained in the neurology of the gifted. So let's look at sensual. You know, these are the kids who also grow up into adults because I have to do it and cut all the tags out of my clothing. I don't like certain smells. Neon light is just not neon. What is it? Fluorescent light, just crazy. So these are people who have sensual overexcitabilities, and there's really 5 in 1 because it can be what you take in through your eyes, what you can take in through your ears, what you take in through your taste, what you take in through your touch. So we're looking at people who are very sensitive to sensory stimuli. Does that apply to anybody in here? Did anybody come out with? Okay, there's a neon sign in the back of the room there. Very good. So these are people that need to have things that are pleasing sensually. So now you can see that there's a plus side and a minus side. Isn't it great to have boundless energy? Yes? Is it great to be needing to get up and move all the time in a room that maybe is not appropriate? No, right? So there's the blessing side and the curse side. For sensual, you know, if I see a beautiful sunset and I take intense joy in that sunset, that's a great thing. That is a great thing. But if I can't be in a room where the smell of coffee is because it absolutely turns my stomach, or I can't wear anything but a particular, or I can't eat anything except a particular texture, therein lies the curse, right? So there's the blessing and the curse. It's a two-edged sword. It can be very helpful to you, but it can also be something that causes problems for you. And that therein lies the unique social-emotional part. And
the experience, one experience we all share in this room, well, not all of us, but some of us, was Marlowe's. The first night, the early bird, and it seemed to really bother some of us more than others with the loud, caustic music that was going on. And that's what I'm connecting with. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm connecting with that experience. Were you there, Lori?
No, I didn't go Friday. But I saw it yesterday. You know, when the feedback happened on the microphone, some people just grimaced a little bit, and some people literally put their hands on their ears and held as tight as they could because it was overstimulating for them. You were one of those people? Yeah. So these are people that are highly sensitive to many things. Imaginational. These are our out-of-the-box thinkers. These are our inventors. These are our peacemakers. These are people who have a rich and robust imagination. They have very vivid dreams when they dream at night. They can have the same kind of vivid daydream during the day. These kids often, if you're a kid, are often misdiagnosed as ADD without the hyperactivity, but it can be a dual diagnosis. The difference is that these kids daydream, but they can still tell you everything the teacher said. These are adults who can sit in meetings for their businesses and have a artistic masterpiece at the end of somebody's presentation, but they can also tell you every detail of that presentation. So they live in that very robust imagination.
That's so cool.
In the workplace, they're very highly intuitive. And again, this is that perceptivity that we saw in the characteristics and being able to read patterns, to envision what is, what could be. The intellectual is the busy mind. And many times when you have a person that has busy body psychomotor and busy mind intellectual, they're non-sleepers. How many people in here have difficulty sleeping? Can't turn it off? How many of you just can't turn your mind off at night? Same people who raise your hands with difficulty sleeping. That's that busy mind piece. These are people who constantly have to be challenged intellectually. They are never done learning. They're never satisfied with their learning. But this is also the area that has that moral thinking, that what is right, what is not right, what is just, what is unjust, and they are continually bothered when they find that things are not just. These are people who may be depressed, not about their own situation, but the situation in the world at large. So if there were for instance, when Katrina hit and all the people's homes were wiped out, you may have lived in Northern California. It didn't bother you at all in terms of where you lived geographically. It didn't touch you at all. You had no relatives, and yet you became very, very depressed for the plight of the people that were in New Orleans. That's called existential depression, and many people with the overexcitability and the intellectual overexcitability suffer from existential depression from time to time because of that dissonance between what they know is right and good and what's actually happening.
I don't know if you've ever heard this, just as an interesting note. I know a child.
Hold on, because I know everyone's here. Yes, I do.
All right. That's your I know of one gifted child who was diagnosed by a psychiatrist with existential depression at the age of 2.5. So that's
Very likely.
a very young age for that.
These are people that cannot watch the news. Seriously, if they watch the news, they won't be able to sleep at night. And there are children at the age of 2 years, just like she said, that also have that same difficulty. Their parents have to keep the news from them. They can't allow them to watch the news, or they will obsess on the plight of the world, even as a 2-year-old, wanting to do something about it, yet knowing as a 2-year-old I can't do something about it. But it happens to adults. Wanting to do something about it, not feeling as if you can do anything about it, can result in that existential depression. And thank you for bringing that up, because it's a very important point. So these people in the workplace, you're going to see them, they are voracious learners. They can't ever get enough. They change jobs frequently because, one, they've done everything they can with it, they've learned everything they can from it, and they've got to move on to something else that provides them with that challenge and that intellectual pursuit and more knowledge. And these people can be very impatient with people who don't process as quickly as they do, with people who make errors. I used to stand up at the front of the room and go, "My name is Lori Comallie-Caplan, and I am a recovering perfectionist." It never really goes away, but I do try to put a few errors into my presentations just so I can deal with it. Okay, the emotional overexcitability. Deeply, intensely emotional. For children, this may look like they are happy as they've ever been. They want a trip to Disneyland in the morning and crying all night long at night because their one friend didn't play with them that day at the playground. It could be, oh my God, I'm having a panic attack. What if they don't like me tomorrow? Those 999ers, man, they're really smart. I don't know if I'm going to live up to their expectations. And that intense the feeling piece, right? So we do have a large percentage of gifted across the age span with anxiety disorders because they feel things so intensely. Don't you love me running around?
Could this be empathy too?
Empathy too.
So I have a question. Can I be trained out? Because I know I was a lot like that as a kid, but over time I've learned to adapt. So I just
trained out? So I want to give you an example of, that's a coping skill, right? Because we're talking about a blessing and a curse, right? My son has an emotional overexcitability. He's 28 years old now. He still will call me at night crying on the phone. I mean, absolutely crying. Because someone at work hurt his feelings in some way or did something that wasn't appropriate. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is a 28-year-old boy still calling me crying. However, he didn't cry at work, right? So I'm going to tell you a short little story. So we were at our SENG conference, and I had my son come do, he's learning digital cinematography, and so I actually had him come and do interviews for Give Him Practice, Give Us a Benefit. And he was doing some filming, and there was a little boy, because we have a children's program, against a column, just crying and crying and crying. And I asked the teachers, what's going on here? I didn't want to interfere with something they were already doing. They said, we've tried everything. He just won't stop. We can't get him to stop. He got his feelings hurt by another kid. My son's going, Mom, please let me go deal with this. He had nothing to do with the children's program, but he couldn't stand the crying. I was, no, just let it go. No, Mom, you got to let me go deal with this. I can't take it anymore. So I said, okay, go deal with it. So he goes over to the kid. He says, what's wrong, buddy? And the kid tells him about somebody hurting his feelings. He's crying. My son couldn't really get him to stop, so he drew a square on the floor because he noticed he was from Ohio, and he said, hey, if you're in the state of Ohio, where do you live? So the kid got a little distracted, right? And we started talking to him, started sniffling up a little bit. So that went on a little while, and then the kid says to him, I'm just a really sensitive kid. And at my school, they call me the crybaby. And he says, I don't know why I cry like this, but it just comes out. I just cry when, sometimes I even cry when I'm happy. And I cry when people hurt my feelings. And I just hate being called a crybaby. So my son said to him, this is your story. My son said to him, you know, I'm that sensitive kid too. But I learned that I have to wait to do my crying. Because if I cry during the day, I'm going to miss out on something. Like you're missing out on magic microscopes right now. You know, you really want to try to wait. I'm not telling you not to cry, but, you know, as you get older, you're going to want to wait till the end of the day. So, I still, because he even told the little kid, I still call my mom at night when I have to cry and cry to my mom. So do you train out of it? No, I think you always feel intensely, but I think you learn to cope with it. And some people cope in different ways. And some people turn their emotions into action. You know, and so if you feel really deeply about something, but you've been taught, so to speak, that that's not appropriate to show your feelings as a man or to feel that deeply, sometimes men take that, women too, if it's not appropriate, and they adapt to the situation and they bring it out in other ways. So they might turn into action rather than emotions. Often misdiagnosed as bipolar. But bipolar has much longer cycles. I mean, people with emotional overexcitabilities can be absolutely devastated one moment and extremely happy the next. So it's, you know, it looks like mood swings, but they're just based on the moment in time and what they're feeling. Okay, so whoops, one more back. One more back. There we go. So in the workplace, you're going to see this sense of social justice, this right and wrong from people who have emotional overexcitabilities. You may see some existential depression. What's wrong with Sarah today? Oh my gosh, you know. The empathy piece, thank you for bringing that up as well, Susan. The empathy, that sense of responsibility outside of yourself for the greater good of your workplace or your city or your community or your country or the world. And the other piece of this is that people with emotional overexcitabilities can take on the emotions of others. So if Brian is really upset about something that has happened, I might take on that upset. I might even feel it more intensely than Brian does.
I failed your test.
Well, so let's look at, there's no passing or failing. It's sort of like being a circle or a square, right? It doesn't really matter which one as long as you know what you have. And some people, like I said, some gifted people really don't have any of those overexcitabilities. And honestly, I would probably rather be one of those people because then you are, you know, pretty well balanced and you don't have those very intense kinds of issues coming up. How many of you had an emotional overexcitability? And I wonder if there's a correlation with circles with that, Susan.
And some of the box characteristics, though, too. Very deep feelings.
Yeah. How about intellectual? Oh, yes. Many of you. Wow. How about psychomotor? Wow, they're all on this side of the room almost.
What's your percentage?
I'm sorry,
percentile cutoff for
75. 75 or greater. 75% or greater. Now, you also know that no one test really accurately defines that. As you're reading and talking about it, you may realize, you know, my score didn't come up that high, but I know that's me. I mean, you're going to have a good feeling for that as well. What did I miss? Imaginational. A few of those. And then sensual. Well, a few of those as well. How many of you had...
I got a miserably low score on Sensual that I do not agree with.
Okay, so Ed, are you Are you thinking sensual? Or are you thinking sensual?
Okay. Just a point quickly to make. Part of the objection to this kind of material by the hard science people is that these kinds of tests are based on self-report. You know, there's no right answer, gang. And that is often a problem for people who need right answers. And self-report is often questioned as really valid. And I think that point needs to be made for both you and me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is not a science. However, it is important to know oneself in order to live your gifts. I mean, Susan is a great example of someone who's living in her gifts, right? And I think it's really important. The better you know yourself, the more apt you are to find your niche, so to speak, to live within your gifts. I just want to really quickly, just for my own curiosity, and then we'll move on. I want you to leave your hand up, but I'm going to say, raise your hand if you had one overexcitability. If you had just one category, just one category and 75% or above. If you had 2, keep your hands up. If you had 3, keep your hands up. If you had 4, keep your hands up. If you had all 5. I want to talk to you guys. You're interested. Very nice.
So this relates to self-reporting. I have a 12-year-old. One of the reasons I got involved in this group is I wanted to talk to parents about their smart kids, which has been, very helpful over the years. So with self-reporting, would you be inclined to use the same battery with kids and have them self-report? And if so, do you expect that their self-knowledge is adequate to achieve any kind of useful accuracy on this?
Okay. I actually use this in my therapy because I try to my therapeutic treatment, I try to apply it to whatever their overexcitability is. So if I have a kid that has a sensual overexcitability, number one, my office is going to change when I see that child so that it becomes more appealing to whatever their sensual overexcitability is, as well as when I provide home programs with parents in terms of helping kids. I don't know if any of you have ever seen a gifted meltdown. Any of you guys have kids that you've seen a gifted meltdown? Look at her. Oh, no. So, when I'm working with parents about working with their kids, I always use their overexcitability. So now, to answer your question, yes, it depends on the child. Of course, I would get to know the child before I had them fill this out to know whether they had the ability to self-report. So sometimes I have the parent do it for them, so the parent does it based on their knowledge of the child. Sometimes I have the parent do it and the child do it so that I can see where it correlates. And sometimes, depending on the age of the child, I just have the child do it for themselves. But absolutely, it helps me a lot in my therapeutic approach to children.
You know what I think would be really interesting is if you and Susan were to sort of collaborate and look at the statistics and things that you get for the different... Oh, God.
I know.
Okay. Shall I start?
I need to run anyway.
What I think would be entirely interesting...
I ate a lot of the Taste of Denver yesterday.
So yes. Is if you and Susan were to collaborate on this and sort of mesh some data together on gifted people in terms of the shapes and things, and then by shape or by overexcitability, look at how those come out and what sorts of data percentages. Exactly. You can publish on this. You're welcome. I take 20% as a commission.
Okay. You'll be our motivators, right, to keep us after it, right?
All right. I'll run your ass. I'm going to triangle. I'll make you work.
One just really wonderful, I think, quick point in management, and that's really my training. One of the things we do to counteract self-report, in other words, in employee evaluations, the boss is evaluating you, but the boss may not, the higher they go, ever be evaluated. And so one of the things we're doing there is called 360s. Are any of you familiar with 360s?
Yeah.
Okay. Where your employees, your peers and colleagues, and your superior, at least one of those, also evaluates your performance. And it is to counteract what might be a rather egocentric view of oneself from the triangle perspective.
Thank you, Susan. All right, to try to wrap things up here on time, I want to talk to you just about a few things in terms about living within your gifts and being a wholly productive and self-satisfied person. I was a perfectionist, number one. And number two, if somebody said, will you, if I had the ability, I said yes. Whatever it was. And I have multi-potential ability. I'm a technologist. I do a lot of different things. And so if somebody said, can you do this for me? Will you do this for me? My answer was always yes. What do you think that did to me? Yeah, exactly. My plate was always full and falling over, but I'm also a stickler for deadlines, so I would absolutely kill myself to make sure it happened. How many of you have had full plates like that? Okay? So I took this course called Discovering Your Sacred Gifts, and it absolutely changed my life, and I became a guide for that. But one of the things I learned in there was that we do all have particular gifts or areas that we are really profoundly gifted at. And in those areas, we make a great difference in the world. But we don't make a great difference with everything we do if we say yes to everything we do. And when you are working within your gifts, and I can tell this about Susan, we just started, you are in the flow, right? You lose track of time, and you could work 24 hours straight if you were working in your gift and not be tired. You are re-energized. So I see a lot of nodding heads. That's awesome that you're. So you should not be saying yes to everything, right? You should not be saying yes to things that are not your gift. You should be saying no, because I used to think it was selfish if I said no to someone. That's selfish, right? But if I say yes to something that's not my gift, but it's Ted's gift, if I say yes to that, it takes the opportunity for Ted to step up and use his gift. That's the selfish piece, right? So one of the things that we have to do is know ourselves so well that we know when to say no. Right.
I was just going to say, in the business world, they say play to your strengths, not your weaknesses. So that gets around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you really want to make sure that you know yourself well enough to say yes when it's going to be productive for you and the world out at large, and you're going to be re-energized by what you're doing, and that you don't say yes to things that you're taking away from someone else using their gift. So what about, how do we do that? How do we know ourselves? Well, Susan gave us a great opportunity yesterday to know one facet of our personality, and where we may shine and where we may need to surround ourselves with people who have those other facets in order to have a more balanced thing. We want to know how we receive things, our channels of reception, our overexcitabilities. You also want to look at some reflective pieces like journaling or even just daydreaming, poetry writing, sketching. What are some of the ways that you guys use to know yourselves better? What are your reflective practices?
Getting away. Okay, one that I like to do is, I've read, is to take a quote that hits me and write about it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Take a couple of paragraphs and just write what it hit, and I can look and say, gee, now I understand why that struck a chord with me.
Very good.
Poetry writing and analyzing dreams.
Oh, I like the dream analyzation. That's awesome. Brian?
I wrote an article last night for Susan Dillinger.
Very good. So we all have different ways that we reflect upon who we are, what we do well, what our gifts are. Then we need to look at just valuing our own uniqueness. Some people feel offset by their uniqueness. They feel like they don't belong in any particular group. They have a sense of loneliness. But really, we need to use that loneliness. We need to value our own uniqueness and accept our faults and vulnerabilities, because only when we let go of that, not be needing to be perfect, not needing to meet every need, can we really shine and be creative in where we have our own gifts. We want to find our own sources of personal power. And it's basically what I just said. If we release our own sense of we have to be perfect or our vulnerabilities, it gives us that creative power. And we want to look at acknowledging the gifts and the uniqueness of everybody around us so that we can have that balanced management team or that balanced family or that balanced work environment. And I wanted to read you this quote by Anna Marie Roper, who is she's the mother of gifted education in the United States. Maybe being beyond old forces us to really understand that the mystery is a reality. What stretches beyond the door of death is an eternity of unknown. Eternity and infinity are concepts that young children often struggle with, but even they soon give up because they can't find the answer. During our active lifetime, we forget about it. We get so involved with day-to-day living that we don't see the mysterious universe around us. Living beyond old, with our eyes open, may force us to truly accept the reality of the infinite and eternal, as well as to continue to understand the fact that we can never really know the answer while we are on this earth. So peeking around the door of death, I see the road to eternity and infinity as the reality I need to live now. From traveling miles and miles of earthly road, I have gained the wisdom to accept the unknown, not only as the past and the present, but also as my only future. So my conclusion is that when you reach the age beyond old, your only reality is the unknown. This has actually always been true. So my last little thing for you is to expect the unexpected. To look and celebrate those forks in the road. How many of you are from the Southwest and you've heard of descansos? Anybody? So the descansos are the crosses that mark where someone died in the road.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you see those, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so descansos originally came from the pallbearers when they would take the caskets from the church and they would carry them all the way to the cemetery in the old days before, cars and so forth. And they would stop to rest along the way. And during those resting places, they would plant crosses and flowers and so forth. And that was the descansos from the old days. And then it translated into modern days. If someone died along the highway, they would plant the crosses there as to mark in celebration the passing of someone, but to mark in celebration of their life and the fact that there was a rebirth at that point. And so I like to look at that as in our own life's journey, that there are times where we come to a fork in a road and we must choose. We must leave something behind, and sometimes we have to grieve. It might be a spouse, it might be a job, it could be any part, it might be a residence. We have to choose something new, and so we do celebrate that we had that time, but we mark a new era, a new birth, and we move forward from there. And so when you kind of draw out your life's journey, you're going to have those descansos along the way and recognize those not as only loss, but as rebirth of a new part of your journey. And kind of looking at things as, what is this? This is a new blessing. So, wow, how is this all going to turn out? I'd like to leave you with a portion of a song. We'll see if this worked. It worked earlier.
Oh, you have sound?
Uh-huh. I do. I just
you did. Oh, you did. Okay.
But
she's not getting it.
I'm not getting it. Oops.
There you go. She don't plug in.
Oops. Yeah.
There it is. Okay. There you go.
Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go. So make the best of this test and don't ask why. It's not a question, but a lesson learned in time. It's something unpredictable, but in the end it's right. I hope you had the time of your life.
And I hope you have the time of your life. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to come and speak to the 999 Society.